Good morning. Just when you thought it was safe to come to church because I haven't preached for a while, here I am. It has taken us quite a long while to get through John's Gospel. Is that all right? It's taken us quite a while to get through John's Gospel, maybe longer than our esteemed leader had originally anticipated. But we are on the home straight now because we only have 6 chapters and 20 verses to go when I've finished. We might make it before the second coming. Who knows? Seriously, who knows? I've spent a while pondering what he has to say to us here today through these 7 verses that I've got. That's John 15 verses 1 to 7. A few things have popped into my head, and I'll have to leave you to decide whether they came from God or whether they came from my fevered imagination. As it's only 7 verses, I'm going to read it to you twice. Sounds good, doesn't it? Here's the passage as it appears in the NIV. And as we join the disciples here, Jesus is speaking. He says, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be given you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples." In the Message, it says, "I am the real vine, and my Father is the farmer. He cuts off every branch of me that doesn't bear grapes, and every branch that is grape-bearing he prunes back so that it will bear even more. You are already pruned back by the message I have spoken. Live in me. Make your home in me just as I do in you. In the same way that a branch can't bear grapes by itself, but only by being joined to the vine, you can't bear fruit unless you are joined with me. I am the vine, you are the branches. When you're joined with me and I with you, the relation intimate and organic, the harvest is sure to be abundant. Separated, you can't produce a thing. Anyone who separates from me is dead wood, gathered up and thrown on the bonfire. But if you make yourselves at home with me, and my words are at home in you, you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. This is how my Father shows who he is. When you produce grapes, when you mature as my disciples." We're probably all familiar with that passage to one degree or another. And this is one of those occasions where I think the Message translation is really helpful in making the meaning clear, or aspects of the meaning clear. So firstly, let me get something that comes out of this passage off my chest. One of the most important things when we talk to people and live our lives in front of people, whether it's family, friends, work colleagues, college, wherever, is that we use language that they will understand. Some of you will know that I have a real bee in my bonnet about this. If people cannot understand the language we're using, then what's the point of talking to them? If our meaning in what we say or do or sing isn't accessible to people with no church connection or history and no relationship with Jesus, we are just a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal as far as they're concerned. Jargon must die. It kills communication and excludes people from our family. It's the exact opposite of what we want to achieve. I may show my age at this point, but who remembers the song Leader of the Pack? Yeah? Anybody go that far back? Yeah, Nigel does. You don't remember it? No, you're too young. Okay. Because it talks about having our own way of talking and our own way of walking, and it talks about how you know you're part of us and how you know you're not part of us. And that is not really what we want. We don't want that. And Paul, when he was speaking to various groups of people on his travels, he used to make sure to use language and analogies, stories, that his audience could relate to, that they could understand. If you remember in the book of Acts, he spoke to the Greeks about their unknown God in philosophical language and in terms that they could understand. He spoke to agricultural communities using the seasons and the principles of farming to demonstrate who's behind it all and where it all comes from. Well, here, in our passage, Jesus is clearly using an agricultural analogy to make his point. Anne and I have a little experience with vine growing. Anne was given a grapevine for her birthday a few years ago, and we've had varying degrees of success with it. A couple of years ago, we managed to grow enough grapes for a certain winemaking Baptist pastor to produce 6 bottles of wine from it. Last year, we had 3 very small and rather pathetic and bitter-tasting bunches of grapes, which we didn't bother with at all, threw them away. My point is that I am no expert, and I hope you don't mind me saying that you probably don't have a lot of experience of growing grapes either. So, South Croydon is not known for its vineyards, let's be honest. But mind you, if I'm wrong, and you do know about how to grow grapes, please come and put me straight. Kathy? But it doesn't mean, when we're listening to a story like this, that we need to actually give a bit of thought to the analogy. It's not culturally relevant to us, it doesn't relate to our time, and it's probably not a good idea at work to quote this story, this passage, to the IT guy who thinks in binary code anyway, or to our neighbour who doesn't have a garden, never mind the chance to grow grapes or a vineyard. So I like the Message version. Whilst we're not in an agricultural community, it simplifies the language and makes it clear that whilst Jesus is the genuine vine at the centre of life, the plant, the branches are actually also part of the vine. They're not just a separate thing that is hooked onto it. They're actually part of the vine. And it makes it clear that all life comes from the vine. Jesus says that the Father cuts off every branch of me that doesn't bear grapes. It's a subtle distinction, but branch of me suggests that the branch is also a full part of him. Whereas where it says in the NIV, every branch in me, as other versions say as well, that perhaps suggests maybe a slightly lesser connection. It's a language thing. Call me picky, I know you will. But what Jesus is trying to convey here is that we need to see ourselves as wholly part of him, not just as having a connection with him. And this is the really clever bit. This is where I pull together our somewhat ongoing study of John with what Nick and Steve have been speaking about over the last couple of weeks. Belonging. Clever? Yeah, good. You like that? The branches belong on the vine. See what I've done there? They cannot produce fruit if they are cut off the vine. The leaves on them may survive if you cut off a branch and put it in water, but it will not grow grapes. It won't. In the same way, we belong in Jesus, in his kingdom. Nick was talking just now about when we go into a shop, the kingdom of God walks into the shop with us. It's because the kingdom is within us. Apart from him, we may survive for a while, but our lives will look pretty barren. Okay, back to the passage. Live in me, make your home in me just as I do in you. In the same way that a branch can't bear grapes by itself, but only by being joined to the vine, you can't bear fruit unless you are joined with me. And what we're starting to see references to here is choice. Make your home in me just as I do in you implies that it's our choice whether we do that or not. He guarantees to make his home in you, but you have the option of not making your home in him. It's a choice. And the NIV says, remain in me and I will remain in you. The consequences of the choice are clear. If you choose not to remain in him, you will not bear fruit. You can't expect to bear fruit if you do not remain as part of the vine. And this may seem a little harsh, but what we're really talking about here is our hearts. And actually it's not harsh, it's just clear and truthful. What Jesus is introducing us here to is the concept that becoming a follower of Jesus is not a finishing line that we cross. It's actually the starting line of a whole new race, a whole new life. And that race is about moving and moulding our hearts towards and into the same shape as his heart. When you're joined with me and I with you, the relation intimate and organic, the harvest is sure to be abundant. Separated, you can't produce a thing, and so on. The NIV, it says, if a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away. And the NIV seems there to hint that maybe remaining in him is not just up to us, but it could also be up to him. Maybe down to the fact that we haven't been trying hard enough or haven't put in enough effort. If anyone does not remain in me, he is thrown away. Oops. Never mind. I don't think that's actually what it's saying, though. Check the message again. It's our choice. Anyone who separates from me, Jesus says, is deadwood. He doesn't say anyone who I don't think is doing their bit. Anyone who isn't trying hard enough, anyone who isn't putting in enough effort, he doesn't say that. He is making it very clear that it's our choice, and he is not, although you may have heard this verse used in other ways, he is not using fear to motivate you into doing more. I think that's very important. If you are in Jesus, the only way out of Jesus is your choice. We know there are verses in the Bible that talk about nothing can separate us from the love of Jesus. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. And that's true, except for the one thing, which is us. We can separate ourselves from the love of God if we choose to. The consequences of doing that, of course, are not great, but sadly, people do sometimes lose track of the truth, particularly if their lives aren't going how they would like. I've been there. Actually, quite a lot. Here's a very positive thing for those who remain attached to the vine. When you are joined with me and I with you, the relation intimate and organic, the harvest is sure to be abundant. What brings that certainty? Because there's no maybe there. The harvest may be abundant. It says it will be. Jesus says it will be. So what makes that certain? What makes that certain is the intimate and organic relationship that we have with Jesus. So it's vital to have that, an intimate and organic relationship with Jesus. I know those words sometimes make people uncomfortable because they have many meanings, obviously. But what we're talking about here is having a relationship with Jesus that is close, that is deep, and that is as intimate as any other relationship it is possible to have. Your habits, your physical life, your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations, your problems, your disasters, your successes, your disabilities and sicknesses, the goals that you have had blocked, your desires and the harm you've suffered at the hands of others. All of these things and anything else you can think of that goes on in your life, he wants to share and walk through with you hand in hand. And if you're anchored into the vine, you will bear much fruit. I have to say that I have heard this verse in the past used as a way of beating people up and telling them that they need to bear more fruit. And I think what that usually means is that whoever is using it that way is suggesting that the people need to be more committed to their agenda and they need to do more towards the leader's agenda. But it's not down to effort. This whole fruit-bearing thing is not down to effort. It's down to your heart. And where is your heart rooted? How much fruit does Jesus say you need to bear? How many grapes do you need to produce? Some of us may worry that we actually don't produce enough. We may look around at our lives, we may question, even this morning, what fruit there is in our lives. And we may worry that there isn't enough to qualify us. What does the passage say? The passage says, every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. He doesn't say how much fruit. He simply says, fruit. Okay? Quantity is not important here. The bearing of fruit is what matters. So any branch which bears any fruit, however small and insignificant that fruit may be, qualifies as a fruit-bearing branch. So whatever you feel about yourself, you qualify. However little fruit you may feel you've produced, you are a fruit-bearing branch. And please don't think I've got this nailed. I haven't. I certainly haven't. What does every fruit-bearing branch qualify for? It qualifies to be pruned to bear more fruit. You're being trained. You're being prepared for fruit bearing. If you're still not clear about where you stand, Jesus says, you are already pruned back by the message I have spoken. So be encouraged by that. Okay. I really wanted to try and ignore the next bit of this, but I can't. This is the tricky bit. The NIV says, if you remain in me and my words remain in you, Ask whatever you wish, and it will be given to you. Tricky one, that. The Message says, but if you make yourselves at home with me and my words are at home in you, you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. And I think, again, this is one of those verses that over the generations has been interpreted to mean, whatever you ask God for it, and you can have whatever you want. People have interpreted it that way who haven't really thought about it. And it often leads to a not so good outcome. And I've heard people say this, I can't believe in God because I asked him for a new pony, the job I went for, a pay rise, the money for a new car, a husband, a wife, whatever, and I didn't get what I wanted. And that proves that Jesus doesn't love me and doesn't exist. Well, clearly here, Jesus is not saying that if you ask God for a new iPad, you will wake up tomorrow morning to find one on your bedside table, fully charged, set up and ready to go. It's the setup that's the difficult bit with those things. Why can't they just give you a book that tells you how to do it? You have to do it all from stuff that you don't know. I think the whole thrust of these 7 verses is this. If you are properly anchored in him and his word, his heart and his ways are firmly built into you, you actually won't be bothered about that new iPad or the pay rise or whatever. But you will be bothered by the things that bother him. Things like poverty, abuse, cruelty, ignorance, hatred, suffering, loneliness, sickness, depression, prejudice, fear, and so on. You will want to express your love for him, to him. His love for those around you, to them. You will want what he wants for them. And that is what your heart will lead you into asking for. And yes, he will listen and act upon what you ask, because like King David, you will be a man or woman after God's own heart. You don't have to be perfect. David certainly wasn't. We know that. But your heart will be in tune with God's. And the challenge here isn't even about bearing fruit. It's about where your life is centred. The branch can't fulfill its purpose without having its origin in the vine. This passage is about where you need to be in order to bear fruit, which clearly you can't do by yourself. Don't beat yourselves up about it. God does not require performance from you. He does, though, over everything else, desire a meaningful relationship with you. There you go.
Thanks, Richard.